This lecture is going to cover Chapter 16, which is the digestive system. So to start with a little overview of digestion, the system itself is going to be composed of an irregular tube called the alimentary canal or the gastrointestinal tract or the GI tract. So this is basically a long hollow tube that extends from the oral cavity or the mouth through the entire abdominal cavity to the anus. In an adult, this tube is going to be about 29 feet long, and this is where food is going to be digested and absorbed. So this kind of gives us an overview of all of the different organs in the digestive system. So we'll start with the oral cavity here and then work our way down, wind through the small intestine, go through the large, and then end at the anal canal. This chart is in your book or this table, and it divides those organs into either main organs or accessory organs. So this one is kind of helpful to differentiate between the two types. A little overview of digestion and the key terms that you'll hear in this chapter. So ingestion refers to when complex foods are taken into the GI tract. So this is when we're eating, that term describes eating. And then digestion is going to be processes that break down the complex nutrients into simpler ones. Digestion can then be further divided into either mechanical digestion or chemical digestion. Mechanical is the physical process that's going to break these large chunks of food into smaller bits. Chemical digestion is going to be a chemical process that actually works on the molecules, breaking the large ones into smaller molecules. Motility is the term that refers to GI movements that come from that smooth muscle contraction. Secretion is the release of the digestive juices and hormones that play a role in digestion. Absorption refers to the movement of the nutrients from the digestive tract into the internal environment of the body. And then regulation is the neural, hormonal, and other mechanisms that actually regulate that digestive activity. This table is also in your book, and it just kind of gives a nice view of those different key terms and an easy definition for each. So into the structure of the wall of the digestive tract, it is going to be broken up into 4 layers of tissue. We have the mucosa, submucosa, muscularis, and serosa. So this is going to be, if we're moving from the inside of the digestive tract, working our way out. So the mucosa is going to be the first layer that we'll encounter if we start inside of the digestive tract. So that hollow space inside is going to be called the lumen. So this is going to be the layer that surrounds that lumen. So this is going to vary depending upon the location. So it could be tough and stratified or delicate and simple. It just depends on the consistency of the food as it will be passing through. It is also responsible for mucus production, which is necessary, specifically in the large intestine when we're passing that fecal matter through. Without the mucus in there, it would cause a lot of damage to the layers of the digestive tract. The submucosa is going to just be a connective tissue layer. The muscularis is going to refer to the muscle layer. So it could be circular, longitudinal, and oblique. And these are all going to play a role in GI motility. So some of that motility that we'll see is either going to be peristalsis, which is a wave-like movement that's actually pushing food down the tract. And then segmentation is a back and forth movement, which is going to play a role in mechanical digestion, where it's physically breaking down those large pieces into smaller ones. And then serosa is going to be the serous membrane that covers the outside of the abdominal organs. And this is going to attach the digestive tract to the wall of the abdominal pelvic cavity. This is accomplished through folds called the mesenteries or the mesenteries. Without these attachments, our organs would just kind of fall down into the pelvic cavity. They wouldn't stay secure where they're supposed to be located. So here we can see this would be the lumen inside, and then here's our mucosa, surrounded by the submucosa, and then the muscularis, and then finally that serosa on top. And here we can see peristalsis. So this is a wave-like movement where we're pushing that bolus or ball of food throughout the digestive tract. So we're propelling or moving the food with this movement. And then segmentation is actually going to be the back and forth contraction. So contracted here and then back here. And it's going to break apart this bolus into smaller and smaller pieces. Another accomplishment of this specific movement is that it mixes those pieces of food with the digestive juices and really makes sure that it's covered in all of the necessary juices. So the first structure that we'll talk about is going to be the oral cavity. So a couple of different areas, the roof, the uvula, and the floor of the oral cavity. So the roof is going to be formed by the hard palate and the soft palate, which is going to separate the oral cavity from the nasal cavity up above. The uvula is the downward projection of soft palate. So if you look in the mirror and say, you can see that kind of hanging down. That's going to be the uvula. And then the floor is the tongue and the muscles. What we will find on the tongue are the papillae, which are small elevations of mucosa. So these are going to be where our taste buds are found. And then we also have the lingual frenulum, which is a mucous membrane that anchors the tongue to the floor of the mouth. So if you look in the mirror and touch the top of your mouth with your tongue, you can see the frenulum that's going to connect the tongue to the floor of the mouth. So here would be the uvula hanging down, and then the frenulum is going to be this little fold right here. So as soon as food enters into the oral cavity, we're starting those processes of digestion, either through secretions from the salivary glands or the mechanical digestion where we're physically breaking apart that food by chewing. In the mouth, we will find teeth. So each tooth is going to have three main parts: the crown, the neck, and then the root. The crown is going to be covered by enamel, which is the hardest tissue in the body. If we think about how often we use our teeth, chewing, talking, that sort of thing, they really do have a lot of wear put on them, so we need that enamel to protect them. So crown is what is going to stick above the gum line. The neck is right there at the base of the gum line, and then the root is down into either the maxilla or the mandible, depending upon if it's the upper or lower teeth. Some types of teeth that you'll see are incisors, canines or cuspids, premolars or bicuspids, and then molars or tricuspids. So the molars or the premolars are more effective for that kind of grinding, where the incisors and the canines are more of a biting, sharp teeth, I guess. So we have 20 baby teeth. So the average age where a person will get their first tooth is around 6 months, and then should have the full 20 by around 30 months. These will fall out and be replaced by permanent teeth, and an adult will have 32 of these. So it typically starts at about 6 years, and then all of the teeth come through between 17 and 24. So the teeth are going to be responsible for our chewing or mastication. Then in the mouth, we'll also find the salivary glands. So the saliva can be broken up into two different types, either serous type saliva or mucus type saliva. The serous is going to be watery, and it also contains enzymes, but absolutely no mucus. So this is going to be produced by the serous type secretory cells. The mucus type saliva is thick and slippery and contains mucus but no enzymes. So its main role is going to be lubrication. So serous type saliva is actually the salivary amylase that is secreted from that is going to start to begin that process of chemical digestion. And the mucus type saliva is specifically to lubricate the food so that it doesn't damage the larynx or the esophagus as we swallow. And then we have the parotid glands, which are located around the mouth. So these are going to be the largest of the salivary glands, and they produce a serous type saliva. So again, watery and contains enzymes, but there's no mucus in the saliva. And then one disease that can happen to the parotid glands is mumps, which is an infection. Everybody should be vaccinated against mumps now, so that one has kind of gone to the wayside. And then we have our submandibular glands. So this one is actually a mixed gland. So it's going to produce both types of saliva. Located right below the mandibular angle. And then the ducts are going to open on either side of the lingual frenulum. So these are located on the floor of the mouth. And then the sublingual glands are only going to produce mucus type saliva, and they have multiple ducts that open into the floor of the mouth. So each sublingual gland has about 10 to 15 ducts that are located, again, in the floor of the mouth. So here's the location of those. So you can see the parotid is kind of by that temporal mandible joint up here. And then the parotid duct is actually going to go through the roof of the mouth. Then the submandibular and the sublingual glands are going to be in the ducts are going to be in the floor of the mouth. So we have the pharynx, which we talked about a little bit with the respiratory tract. So this one is kind of a dual purpose structure, plays a role in air passage and then also the swallowing of food. So three anatomical components, the nasopharynx, oropharynx, and the laryngopharynx. The oropharynx is going to be our most involved segment. So this is what's going to connect the oral cavity to the larynx and the esophagus. So deglutition is going to be the swallowing of food, and this is regulated through the motor cortex of the cerebrum and then the brainstem. So here you can see nasopharynx in this green kind of square here. So that one hopefully doesn't have any role in the swallowing part, although sometimes I know people laugh and they kind of shoot milk or soda or whatever out of their nose. So this has gone up and out of the nasal cavity, but for the most part, we're looking at the oral cavity and then the oropharynx here. Then we have the laryngopharynx. One thing to note is the larynx doesn't really play a role in the passageway of food, but the epiglottis, which is a component of the larynx, plays a huge role because it actually, when we swallow, it closes this section off so we're not getting any food in the trachea and then down into the lungs. So now we'll kind of look at that BioDigital website. to go through the rest of the anatomy so you can visualize exactly how they connect together and where you will find them in the body. So the first section that we're going to talk about is the esophagus. So the esophagus is what is going to connect the pharynx to the stomach. So we would have pharynx up above, and then stomach will go down below. So this is going to serve as a passageway for food. In this, we will find two different sphincters, which is going to be a valve-like ring of muscle tissue. So the upper esophageal sphincter is going to help prevent air from entering the tube during respiration, so when we breathe. And then the lower esophageal sphincter is going to open and close as food passes through. So this is going to control when the food enters the stomach. It's also going to be referred to as the cardiac sphincter. So the reason that we have this is because of the acid content of the stomach. If we didn't have a closure, we would just get a bunch of acid back up into the esophagus, and then we'd have that constant feeling of heartburn. So food is then going to pass into the stomach. So this portion right here. The size of the stomach is really going to vary depending upon the last time that we've eaten. So it's going to expand after a large meal, but it's about the size of a large sausage when it's empty. So again, food enters through that lower esophageal sphincter, which would be about right here. And then it's going to enter into the stomach, which is broken up into 3 different divisions. So we have the fundus up top, and then the body right here, and then the pylorus is going to be this lower portion. At this section, at the pylorus, we will find another sphincter. The pyloric sphincter is going to close the opening between the stomach and the duodenum, which is a section of the small intestine. Again, we're trying to isolate the acid contents of the stomach. In the stomach, that muscularis layer is going to be made up of 3 different layers of smooth muscle. So the longitudinal, circular, and then oblique muscles. So this is going to result in a very powerful movement from the stomach. So we have muscles running this way, and crossways. So what happens is the stomach really churns on itself, and it is going to result in chyme. So this is when we mix the food with the digestive acid found in the stomach. So chyme is going to be kind of a real thick, semi-solid mixture. So once that the food has been all mixed up with the digestive acid, it's going to go through that pyloric sphincter, and it's going to start in the small intestine. So the first section is going to be the duodenum, which you'll see right here. Most of the chemical digestion is going to occur in this section. So once we look at the liver and the gallbladder and the pancreas, you can see that they're all very close to the duodenum. So majority of chemical digestion occurs in the duodenum. The next section is going to be the jejunum. So this is kind of the longer section out of all of them. You can see how it kind of folds in on itself. So again, digestion and absorption are going to occur here. And then the last section we have is the ileum. So this makes up that last big long section. So this is what's found in the abdominal cavity. And it kind of has to fold in on itself in order to fit inside of there. The other thing to think about is that we have that mesentery that's going to help keep all of this intact. Without that mesentery, we run the risk of the small intestine folding or wrapping around itself, something that could result in a blockage. Once that blockage occurs, two things happen. We get that backup of fecal matter, which can start to poison us, and then also the intestine itself, if there's a lack of blood supply, will start to die off, and then we'll have that dead bowel, which is going to result in a pretty serious infection. So then, while we're in this section, we'll kind of talk about the liver real quick. So the liver is going to sit mostly to the right side, but you can see that it will go into the left a little bit. So a pretty large structure. This is going to be the largest gland of the digestive system. Its main secretion is bile. So bile plays a huge role in the breakdown of those fats that we digest. So there's going to be some ducts that come off of this, and I'll try to show you on here. I'll have to kind of look underneath. Okay, so this is the underside of the liver. So we're going to have the common bile duct and the cystic duct are going to be two big ones. So these are going to be the hepatic ducts right here, so right and left. And this is going to drain bile from the liver. Okay. So then next we're going to have the cystic duct, where bile is going to enter and leave the gallbladder, which sits right here. Okay. And then the last one that we have is going to be the common bile duct, which this does not show you. There it is. So here's the common bile duct right here. So this is the conjoining of the cystic and the hepatic ducts. They form the common bile duct, and this is going to drain the bile into the duodenum. So here we can see on the back side that it's going to drain down into the duodenum. Okay. So with the liver and the gallbladder, again, the function is mostly going to be bile production, which we'll talk about a little bit later, but it is going to play a role in that fat breakdown. So the liver is going to produce it, the gallbladder is going to store it, and then the ducts are going to bring the bile from those two structures down into the duodenum. So next we have the pancreas, right in here. So this is going to lie just behind the stomach. The cells of this gland are going to pancreatic juice, which is considered one of the most important digestive juices. So this is going to enter into the pancreatic duct, which I don't know that we have a view of on here. But this would be the back side. So here's the pancreas. You can see how it sits real nice in the duodenum and then behind the stomach. So the main duct is going to empty into that duodenum. Pancreatic juice is going to contain enzymes that digest the three major kinds of nutrients that we will take into the body. So those are going to be carbohydrates, lipids, and proteins. Another thing that's important about the pancreas is that it contains sodium bicarbonate, which is a substance that neutralizes the hydrochloric acid that's found in the stomach. So this is really important because it protects the rest of the small intestines from that hydrochloric acid that could be found in the chyme, or that could come through a little bit into the duodenum. So now we'll get into the large intestines. Center this up a little bit. So the large intestine is going to be broken up into three main areas: the cecum, the colon, and then the rectum. The colon is then going to be broken up into about 4 different areas. So a lot of different subdivisions in this. So this specific website doesn't show you the cecum, but it would be this section right here. And that is what is going to connect the ileum to the large intestine. So we have the cecum, and then we go into the ascending colon. One thing, we do have a little valve right here called the ileocecal valve. So it's just the valve connecting the ileum to the cecum. And then we have our ascending colon here. Next, we'll get into the transverse colon, which goes across the top, and then down into the descending colon, which kind of sits back behind. Then we have the sigmoid colon, which is tucked back here. So sigmoid is just a small section, and then we're going to go into the rectum, which would lead to the anal canal and anus. One structure that I kind of skipped on here is going to be the appendix, which would sit right off of the cecum here. So the appendix is going to be a worm-like tubular structure. No important digestive functions. As far as I know, nobody really, there's a lot of guesses as to what the appendix does, but I don't think anybody really knows for sure, except for get inflamed and infected and then has to be removed. But it just kind of hangs out there. No known digestive functions. So now we'll head back to the slides here. So the peritoneum is going to be a continuous serous membrane that lines the abdominal cavity and the abdominal organs. We kind of talked about this in some previous chapters, but just a real quick reminder of it. So we have 2 different layers, the parietal and the visceral. So parietal will line the abdominal cavity, while the visceral is going to cover the organs themselves. And then we have the peritoneal space, which is the small space between those 2 layers. From the peritoneum, we have 2 different extensions. So the mesentery is going to be an extension of the parietal peritoneum, which attaches the small intestine to the posterior abdominal wall. So this is what keeps those small intestines kind of upright and in place, and also prevents them from wrapping around each other or getting pinched or twisted or anything like that. And then we have the greater omentum, also known as the lace apron, which hangs down from the lower edge of the stomach and transverse colon over the intestine. So this is going to be found on the anterior side, while the mesentery is attached to the posterior side. So here it kind of shows, this isn't the best picture I know, but it shows the mesentery on the back and then the greater omentum on the front. So a little bit about digestion. This is going to be the transformation of foods into substances that can be absorbed and used by cells. So we're breaking down these large chunks of food into very small molecules so that the body can absorb them. Those two different types that we mentioned before, mechanical digestion and then chemical digestion. So mechanical is chewing or mastication, swallowing or deglutition, and then peristalsis, which is going to break the food into tiny particles. It also mixes them with the digestive juices and moves them along the digestive tract. Segmentation would be another example of mechanical digestion. And then the last example is a little bit weird because it's hard to think about it this way, but the emulsification of fat by the bile is considered a mechanical digestion. Chemical digestion is going to break up those large food molecules into compounds that have smaller molecules. So there's normally some sort of digestive enzyme that's involved with this. So this shows how the different minerals, nutrients, that sort of thing are digested and then absorbed. So there's always going to be a breakdown of these. So polysaccharides, means many, is going to be broken down into disaccharides, and then monosaccharides, and then through active transport, it goes through the layer of the intestines and then is diffused into the blood. Proteins are broken up into amino acids. Fats are going to be emulsified into fat droplets and then broken up into fatty acids and glycerol. So these are going to be the three main nutrients that we will digest. So polysaccharides are going to be carbohydrates, and then proteins and fats. So enzymes are going to be a specialized protein molecule that act as a catalyst, which means that they speed up the breakdown of specific nutrient molecules. The one thing that's nice with these enzymes is that during this process, they are not changed or consumed. So these catalysts can be used over and over and over again. The breakdown process is going to be referred to as hydrolysis. So carbohydrate digestion is going to occur mainly in the small intestine. Couple of different enzymes that you'll see. So the pancreatic enzyme amylase is going to break down the polysaccharides or the starches into disaccharides, which are double sugars. What we want to get to is monosaccharides, which are a simple sugar. And the most common simple sugar is going to be glucose. So then the intestinal juice enzymes are going to play a role in this breakdown as well. So there's three different ones. Maltase is going to digest malt sugar, which is maltose. Sucrase is going to digest ordinary cane sugar, which is sucrose, and then lactase digests lactose, which is milk sugar. Protein digestion will start in the stomach and then finish in the small intestine. So pepsin is the gastric juice found in the stomach that results in the partial digestion of the proteins. Trypsin is a pancreatic enzyme, and then peptidase is going to be the intestinal enzyme that completes the digestion and then breaks them down into amino acids. Hydrochloric acid in the gastric juice also helps to unfold these proteins so that the digestive enzymes can react with them. And then fat digestion really doesn't occur before the food reaches the small intestine. So bile does not contain any enzymes, but it's going to emulsify the fat so it breaks it down into very small droplets. And then the pancreatic lipase is going to change those droplets to fatty acids and glycerol. So bile from the liver, pancreatic lipase from the pancreas, which we know both meet up in the duodenum, are going to be responsible for fat digestion. Again, the bile is a mechanical digestion because it's physically breaking apart those fat droplets into smaller droplets. So this just kind of shows where these chemical digestion processes take place, and also the enzyme, the substance that is being digested, and then the end product. Nutrient absorption is going to occur when those end products of the digestive food are going to move from the intestines into the blood or lymph. Foods and most water and vitamins are going to be absorbed from the small intestine, while some water and vitamin K are absorbed from the large intestine. So some things that help with this absorption are surface area. So we have the plica, which are the folds. When the small intestine folds in on itself, that's where that plica comes in. And then the villi are going to be extensions of that mucous membrane to expand the surface area. And then on top of the villi, we have microvilli, which are going to further expand the surface area. So the plica is the folds of the mucous membranes inside of the intestines, digestive organs, and then we have the villi and the microvilli on top. A couple more terms to know. So the bolus is that ball of food that's moved from the mouth to the stomach. Chyme is the food that's then mixed with the gastric juices and broken down into a semi-solid form. Jaundice refers to the skin discoloration that's caused by bile buildup. The skin will take on kind of a yellow tinge, specifically in the eyes, you'll notice it. An ulcer is a lesion that destroys the stomach or intestine lining. So this can cause serious complications because that acid is eating away at those different membranes. And then diarrhea refers to stools or fecal matter that's more fluid than normal. If you have any questions, just email me and let me know. Thanks.